focus largely on the department's work stream on SDG localization, which is an ever-growing area of work. Before we begin, two quick housekeeping notes. The first is that this room does not offer microphones. The room is wired so that those who are online should be able to hear us well, but I ask that anyone who is taking the floor, please speak a little extra on the louder side today. Secondly, in the summers, the UN implements its Cool UN program to reduce our GHG emissions. So the air conditioning will not be on very high in the room today. So I invite everyone, if you're feeling warm, let's be informal. Please don't feel you need to keep your jackets on. Okay, today's session is organized into two panels. In the first, we're going to hear perspectives, international, national, and local, regarding how VNRs and VLRs are contributing to inclusive, multi-level, and integrated SDG planning and action. And the second will zoom in on the role of partners from the UN system and other international organizations, focusing on current and future planned efforts to support SDG localization through multi-level governance and localization. Now, to begin, I'd like to turn over to our opening speaker this afternoon, Mr. Emson Savenda, who is the Chief of the National Strategies and Capacity Building Branch at the Division for Sustainable Development Goals at UNDESA. To get us started, Emson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carol, and good afternoon, colleagues. I think since Monday, this has been a wonderful week, and I think the interest in localization is quite the highest we have ever, right, Shipra?
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Excellencies, representatives of local and regional governments, dear partners, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNDESA, welcome to the VNR Lab on advancing integrated SDG planning and implementation, the role of voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. I would like to take a moment to thank our partners in organizing this event: UN Habitat, OHCHR, the 5 regional commissions, OECD, and UCLG. This is truly an interagency event, and I believe the large number of partners reflects the value and priority that the UN system increasingly places on multi-level approaches to SDG implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, a review of VNRs published since the first of these reports were presented at the high-level political forum reveals that many governments are putting considerable efforts and resources into national planning processes, including integrating SDGs into these plans. This is good news. National development planning is a key approach to accelerating sustainable development, and a growing body of research shows that more than 140 countries, accounting for 75% of the world's population, have published a national development plan since 2012. The resurgence of national development planning has been attributed to the rise of internationally agreed development frameworks, such as the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and the Samoa Pathway. This resurgence has been further bolstered by the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, an agreement between the UN and host government that determines and reflects the UN development system's contributions in the country. The cooperation framework guides the entire UN country team program cycle, driving planning, implementation, monitoring, reporting, and evaluation of collective UN support for achieving the 2030 Agenda. A central question for today's event regards the role of VNRs and VLRs in supporting such planning, and we look forward to hearing your experiences in this respect. Analysis of reviews carried out to date by UNDESA in its annual synthesis report of the voluntary national reviews, to date I think we have done 8 of these reports, point to a number of key lessons that can support effective SDG planning and implementation including the importance of integrating the SDGs in the design, implementation, and monitoring of local and regional development plans, and putting local and regional governments at the center of SDG implementation. Such lessons also highlight the importance of longer planning horizons, the need for new governance models for public policy making, the use of strategic planning and foresight tools, and the reconfiguration of the roles of development stakeholders, strengthening multi-level governance to achieve the 23rd Agenda, and breaking down silos in order to promote horizontal policy coherence across sectoral departments of local and regional governments and countries to manage trade-offs across policy domains. They further point to promoting vertical policy coherence and coordination of priorities across local, regional, and national governments. Advancing integrated SDG planning and implementation also hinges on the ability and willingness of governments to promote devolution and meaningfully engage citizens to promote shared understanding of complex national and local problems, devise integrated solutions that benefit from broader societal consensus, ensure ownership and commitment to possible solutions while leaving no one behind. Local and regional governments and other actors are crucial to ensure that the process is inclusive and accountable. VNRs and VLRs can also advance integrated planning and implementation as they help to monitor and evaluate progress on SDG implementation, facilitate social inclusion and awareness of the SDGs. They can also highlight innovative local resource mobilization solutions and provide concrete examples of local social enterprises that have shown to be impactful in advancing the SDGs. Gondor local reviews highlight such local level activities that countries can scale up for development impact. To advance integrated SDG planning and implementation, countries also need tools that inform them with scenario planning and forecasting. In that regard, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, for instance, has developed the Integrated Planning and Reporting Toolkit software in response to the needs of African countries to simultaneously adopt and integrate the 23rd Agenda and African Union Agenda 2063 into their national development plans and to report on progress in a more efficient and harmonized way. Similarly, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific established the National Sustainable Development Goal Tracker to improve data monitoring and reporting for countries in the region. Further, I would also add that the integrated SDG planning and implementation has to be supported by integrated national financing frameworks to ensure the efficiency of public spending and investment. These frameworks are recognized to be a planning and delivery tool that strengthens the link between planning and financing related processes to overcome obstacles to financing sustainable development at the national level. I look forward to the deliberations of this panel to get further insights on other innovative ways that countries have put in place to accelerate progress to achieve the SDGs and the 23rd Agenda. Lastly, I would want to also mention and promote tomorrow's event that we are organizing. As some of you might know, last month, together with partners including UN Habitat, UNDP, UN Regional Commissions, the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments, and USLG, we launched an introductory interagency policy brief on accelerating SDG localization to deliver on the promise of the 23rd Agenda. We are also pleased to be publishing a series of interagency policy briefs which delve deeper into and offer policy recommendations on a range of key topics relating to localization, including data, e-governance, service delivery, and climate action, among others. We invite you to join us for a side event presenting the findings of this publication tomorrow from 2:30 to 4 p.m. in the United Nations Library, which is on the first floor, reading room. Thank you.
Thank you to Anson for setting the stage for this VNR Lab. I would now like to welcome our esteemed first panel participants who are going to share with us reflections on the way in which voluntary reporting at national and subnational levels can be used to enhance multi-level governance, integrated SDG planning, and implementation at national and local levels. We have an excellent panel with participation from both national and local governments and from United Cities and local governments. We'll be bringing experience from multiple regions in the world. As we have a number of speakers, we request that each panelist please limit their interventions to 5 to 7 minutes. If needed, I will give friendly reminders, but I hope I don't have to. So allow me to start this afternoon with Ms. Amelia Saiz, Secretary General of UCLG. Thank you so much for being here. Ms. Saiz is going to share with us a global perspective, including key findings from the 2024 edition of UCLG's extremely valuable annual report on towards the localization of SDGs. Ms. Saiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We're very pleased to be here with you. I am still full of energy from the morning of the local and regional governments forum. Many of you were there with us, and I would dare say that is actually a very good window to localization and what it means. I fully agree with you that this year we are seeing localization much more clearly in the high-level political forum. I mean, the movement is growing. The numbers of voluntary local reviews are growing, also the number of voluntary subnational reviews. And what is extremely important is that it's also the acknowledgement of the efforts and the meaningfulness of those efforts that are being acknowledged, including in the declaration that is coming out of this high-level political forum. And that doesn't happen so often. Obviously, it is connected with the achievements of the SDG summit, and I would dare say with the efforts and commitment that our constituency has demonstrated with hundreds of cities around the world. Over 295 voluntary local reviews have been produced. Cities like Buenos Aires has done several of them. That is the case also in other cities around the world. Beyond the voluntary local reviews, we also see a growing number of voluntary subnational reviews. There are 44 voluntary subnational reviews and some innovative and bold initiatives like inter-country, like the Nordic voluntary subnational review that was presented this year. And if that wasn't enough, and I'm just giving you highlights of what this movement is around, we are actually also promoting integrating, for instance, orderly, regular migration perspectives into voluntary local reviews and others. And we are working. We have actually produced a guide within the context of the UN Network on Migration and Workstream 6. So just to give you a picture of how cross-cutting and integrated this movement of localization is, and we could talk also in the context of COP, CHAMP, and others. The global agenda for local and regional governments, one single and universal, so and all of these efforts of reporting contribute to that. It's important also to signal that for us, the voluntary subnational reviews and the voluntary local reviews are more than mere monitoring mechanisms. They are transformative mechanisms. And this is why in the yearly report that we do on localization, we try to analyze not only how many voluntary national reviews take into account the perspective of local and regional governments, but we also monitor how many of those processes stick around once that the voluntary national review is over. I am sorry to say, while this year we are bypassing the more than half of the voluntary national reviews are taken into account the local and regional government perspective in some shape and form, and this is groundbreaking. There's still almost half of them that don't. And from those that do, many of the mechanisms that are put in place end when the report is presented. And I think this is very relevant because I would like to highlight here also the important role that local and regional government associations play at national level, but also regional and international, of course, but in particular national level, to ensure the continued interlocution around this. And I think if there is a valuable exercise that the voluntary subnational reviews are demonstrating, is in fact that very connection. We would also like to highlight how significant the process of localization is according to our monitoring in the report in connecting different SDGs. Every single city that we talk to, every single local government association that is involved in the process of a VLR or VSR agrees with us that they no longer monitor one single SDG, that they connect the SDGs, that they are part of one single strategy, which actually really fosters and induces a lot of transformation. And finally, because I know my time is up. I think it is really important for us as international community that is coming together and that are really the engine behind this localization movement. Obviously, I see our partners from UN Habitat certainly, but also OECD, UNDESA, UNDP. I think what we need to crack here is this transformative perspective and potential. What we need to crack here is not only how we can present what has been achieved, but also how this can be enhanced in future mechanisms. And the message that I would like to leave in this respect, and I really urge you to read our report, not only the global report, but also the European report that is produced, because it is based on actual cases. There are over 750 concrete cases and initiatives, is that I do think that there will need to be a greater investment in learning, in city-to-city cooperation, decentralized cooperation as mechanisms to booster this kind of collaboration. I think the local 2030 coalition is very well placed to foster this together with the organized constituency of local and regional governments. So allow me to stop here, but I would like to encourage ourselves to not stop with the findings of the report that we have produced, but to think about what comes next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saiz, for sharing this perspective and for sharing. I know one of the things the report includes a graphic of how localization has been included in international processes over the years, and I think this year Local 2030 has published this booklet with all of the events on localization that are taking place, and really it has achieved a new level. So lots of progress, 50% of national governments are including, and yet lots of room to continue with 50% not yet including. So thank you very much. We now turn to perspectives from national governments, beginning with Ms. Mara Kosu, who is Deputy Head of Unit for Instruments and Technologies for Sustainable Development at the Ministry of Environment and Energy Security in Italy, where SDG localization has been a priority and something that we saw very much highlighted in Italy's last VNR. Ms. Kosu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this space for discussion, which comes right after the forum, which has just ended. It was quite exciting, this kind of localization movement. So I should have a presentation, if it's possible to put it on the screen. Great, thank you very much. I won't go into details, of course, but I just put the presentation for everyone's sharing. The next one, just for keywords, for our experience to just narrate and share with you the work we have been doing the last 4 or 5 years. The first one is bridging the first two interventions about the intersection and direct interlinkages between the National Strategy for Sustainable Development and our localizing the SDG efforts. We have a national strategy. We revised it last year in 2023, and by law, we had the regions and the metropolitan cities to adopt and approve their own strategies and agenda in line with the national one. So since the beginning, localizing the SDG was at the core of our report as a national government. The other element at the core of our reports was the participation at different levels of territorial engagement, which means create linkages between the National Forum for Sustainable Development and the territorial fora that each of our administrations is going to produce and to interact with the right and stakeholders in our country. The last point is about the interlinkage between policy coherence for sustainable development and localization of the SDGs, which is right at the core of our experience. We have an approved national plan for policy coherence, which provides a design for a sustainable development governance, which sees the regions and the metropolitan cities at the core of the decision-making for sustainable development. The next one, please. This means that our new strategy for sustainable development, together with the overarching setting of choices and objectives directly linked and with the integrated SDGs, so we have only integrated choices and objectives dealing with different SDGs, each of them. We have three so-called enabling conditions. The first one is policy coherence, the second one is culture for sustainability, and the third one is participation and partnerships for sustainable development. As you can see, territories and localizing the SDGs are overarching and transversal to all these enabling conditions, which means that they have to be put through every single level of government. And we are going to work with them, the next one please, to work with our territories since our VNR in 2022, just narrating and sharing with all of you the reports we are jointly producing with them into collaborative environments that we facilitate since 2018. We had 18 administrations represented in our 12 integrated VLRs in our VNR in 2022. We have several, almost all of our territories covered by strategies and agendas for sustainable development. The next one, please. Just a quick look, just don't go into details, which means focusing on our enabling conditions means that we have funded and we are funding new agreements coming from two different phases of previous agreements with regions, autonomous provinces and metropolitan cities, focusing on each of the enabling conditions. So coming to policy coherence for sustainable development, a huge amount of interest by our territories was put on the VLRs, as you can see, and on multi-level governance mechanism. The second, please, the next one, about culture, training and empowering among regions and among cities is at the core of their interest, and we are going to facilitate and to support them into this task. And young generation and youth is at the core of the communicative efforts at our territorial level. The next one, please. The last one, partnerships. Youth voluntary reviews have been produced. The first one has been produced in Florence last year, sorry. We are going to support them in further produce and engage youth in their youth voluntary reviews in the coming years, and we are going to also work at national level on this respect. The next one, please. I'm going to the end. Just the scheme of our new national guidelines for VLRs. Our intention as a national government is to accompany our territories in producing as much as possible integrated and joint VLRs, because we would like to put our collaborative efforts also into the review process. Won't go into details again, but just a scheme to demonstrate that each of the VLR is a part of a wider process directly linked with the national process and the territorial one. So the idea is to use the review of the VLR process, as Emilia was saying, not only for reporting, but for habilitating the localization of the SDGs and to empower the people directly working on this issue. The next one, please, about youth. The Metropolitan Florence Youth Voluntary Review was an amazing pilot for us and very inspiring. So going on. It was funded by the Ministry for the Environment in a pilot research to see and test if and how we can manage water involvement or youth in our sustainable development processes. It had a very strict methodology to build on, and it delivered a public platform, which is quite interesting to see, also in terms of direct witnesses by young people and by youth organizations about their involvement in the process. So just to thank you again for this chance and space for discussion, and I just leave the link of all the experience here again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing the experience of Italy in multi-level coordination and collaboration for SDG implementation and the structures that you've put in place to coordinate this. And congratulations on the youth VLR, something I hope that we'll see more of in other countries as well. Moving on to our next speaker, we have with us virtually, joining us from Pretoria, Mr. Lusanda Batala, who is Senior Sector Expert with the National Planning Commission of South Africa, which has been working very closely this last year with numerous local governments and with the South Africa Local Government Association to coordinate efforts on SDG planning review and reporting. Mr. Batala, thank you for joining us from Pretoria. The floor is yours. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Program Director, and good afternoon to everybody. I think mine is just to come to this platform to share the experience of South Africa, but at the same time also to learn from other colleagues. But Chair, as we discuss, this important topic, I think it is important for us to foreground it. One of the key grounding base is the principle of leaving no one behind, which is a cornerstone of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, which guides our collective journey towards a more equitable and inclusive world. This principle, Chair, encapsulates our collective commitment to ensure that every person, regardless of their circumstances, benefits from the progress towards a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive world. So therefore, leaving no one behind means that addressing the root causes of poverty, inequality, and exclusion to ensure that development benefits reach everyone. It also demands a focus that those who are furthest behind first, prioritizing the most vulnerable and the marginalized groups. So the VNR processes and the VLR processes have been instrumental in strengthening dialogue, planning, and action at multiple government levels in South Africa. The reviews serves as a platform for the national and the local governments to align their strategies, ensuring that local priorities complement the national objectives. The reviews have facilitated in South Africa a comprehensive approach to planning and implementation, and ensuring that the country's efforts are coherent and mutually reinforcing. For instance, when South Africa presented the 2019 VNR, one of the areas that was highlighted was the importance of localizing the SDGs to address specific community needs. This realization led to a closer cooperation between the national and the local authorities in South Africa. South Africa is a national coordination mechanism framework for sustainable development that includes multiple disciplinary and multiple stakeholders such as government and non-government stakeholders. The coordinating mechanism leverages the country's existing political and administrative coordinating structures, adapting to SDGs, Agenda 2063, and the SADC RISDP agenda requirements. So delivery on many of the development agenda targets is often anchored on the programs of sub-national level government, particularly the local sphere of government. Aligning plans at these levels with the SDGs, Agenda 2063, and SADC RISDP becomes a critical element of the broad national alignment exercise, including the social stakeholders such as the local government, civil society, the private sector, and the academia. The enhanced coordination between the VNR and the VLR processes has led to tangible progress in South Africa's implementation of SDGs. South Africa's process in implementing the SDGs at various levels involves the government, the private sector, the civil society organization, development partners, and academia. The capacity building process that we went through in South Africa for the local government strengthened the reporting of SDGs in South Africa, and also formed part of the platform for a multi-stakeholder dialogue for accelerated delivery of SDGs and coordinating and supporting multi-level participation to ensure inclusive VNR process. Through the VNR process in South Africa is able to identify gaps and opportunities. The VLR conducted by the various municipalities have further localized these efforts, tailoring interventions to meet unique needs of their communities. VNRs and VLRs are vital in promoting inclusive governance and ensuring no one is left behind. In South Africa, these processes have created opportunities for diverse stakeholder engagement, fostering a sense of ownership and accountability among citizens. The South African government has made concerted efforts to involve civil society, the private sector, and the marginalized groups in preparing VNRs and VLRs. This inclusive approach has enriched the report with a wide range of perspectives, ensuring that the policies and programs are more equitable and responsive to the needs of all citizens. In South Africa, stakeholders' involvement has evolved and expanded. Initially, the focus was on a broad consultation, but over time, we have a more structured and meaningful engagement mechanism have been developed with the private sector, civil society organization, development partners, academia, and the local sphere of government in 2024 producing reports that were the main source documents for the production of the national VNR for South Africa. South Africa, therefore, has broadened its stakeholder base to include more marginalized communities, such as persons with disabilities. This expansion has led to a more targeted and effective progress assessment, identifying possible policy interventions to address the societal group's unique challenges. So therefore, Chair, because of the initiatives that we have engaged on as South Africa, we believe that South Africa has made significant progress in mainstreaming gender and human rights in the national and local planning implementation and reporting. Gender responsive budgeting has been integrated across government levels, ensuring that resources are allocated to address gender disparities and promote women's empowerment. Additionally, human rights considerations are embedded in development plans, ensuring equitable access to opportunities and services for all citizens. South Africa has a robust legal framework and initiatives to promote gender equality, including the gender-based violence and femicide response file and the high female political representation. Also, in terms of the commitment that South Africa has shown in terms of inclusivity, it has exemplified an active involvement of women, youth, older persons, indigenous people, and persons with disabilities in the VNR and VNR processes. South Africa's approach to multi-level planning is showcased through the implementation of the district development model. The model plays a crucial role in driving localization of sustainable development goals. Therefore, Chair, South Africa's approach to promoting ownership of SDGs reflects a comprehensive strategy that integrates education, collaboration, localization, and accountability. By fostering a common understanding of the goals, promoting collaboration across various sectors, customizing objectives to fit local context, and implementing transparent monitoring systems, South Africa is laying the groundwork for sustainable development. This initiative is not just a government agenda, but a collective national commitment. Therefore, Chair, in conclusion, the VNR and VLR processes have been pivotal in advancing integrated SDG planning and implementation in South Africa by fostering multi-level dialogue, facilitating inclusive governance, and adopting good practices in mainstreaming gender and human rights. South Africa is making a significant stride towards achieving the SDGs. As we move forward, South Africa will continue to strengthen its commitment to inclusivity and collaboration, ensuring that no one is left behind in the journey towards sustainable development. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batala, for really giving us such a concrete example from South Africa about the role of VNRs and VLRs in bringing in voices of different stakeholders, of persons who may tend to be left behind in your society, and ensuring that no one's left behind, and to addressing gender equality and also human rights, and also about how the processes of preparing VNRs and VLRs in South Africa have helped to align sustainable development strategies between levels of government. Thank you very much. We now turn to perspectives from local governments, and we're very fortunate to have with us officials from 3 local governments from 3 different regions of the world, each of which has prepared more than one voluntary local review. And we are going to begin with Ms. Nicole Uterze, Deputy Mayor of Bonn, a UN city that has been very actively engaged in SDG planning and reporting for years. Deputy Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, fellow mayors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nicole Uterze, and I'm a member of the Bonn City Council and Deputy Mayor of Bonn. I'm delighted to speak at today's meeting and highlight some of Bonn's experiences with SDG localization. Bonn has been very committed to implementing the 2030 Agenda right from the start. Soon after the adoption of the agenda by the UN in September 2015, our City Council adopted a resolution for its implementation at the local level. This was followed by the development of our first citywide sustainable strategy, which the City Council passed in 2019. I hope you hear me as well in the back. Okay. The strategy is based on the Sustainable Development Goals as laid down in the 2030 Agenda and defines 6 priority fields covering all areas of municipal action. In the next step, we developed our first voluntary local review, presenting it to the UN in 2020. At that time, Bonn was one of only 3 cities in Germany that prepared VLRs with a review of SDG implementation. For us in Bonn, this served threefold. Firstly, we produced this VLR in close context with our sustainability strategy. It revealed in concrete figures how Bonn was positioned in terms of 6 priority areas of the strategy, creating transparency and showing the need for more engagement in particular segments. Secondly, the VLR served as a tool for communication, initiating a fruitful dialogue with our citizens and other cities alike. And thirdly, by outlining our local contributions, the VLR also helped us to underline the important role cities play for the achievement of Agenda 2030 on the national and international level. Since the early days of VLRs in 2020, a lot has happened in terms of integrated SDG planning and implementation, both on local level as well as in the area of multi-level coordination. Looking at the local coordination in Bonn, let me highlight this by taking a closer look at one of this year's focal SDGs, SDG 13. In the field of climate action, our objectives have become much more ambitious. Shortly after the adoption of the sustainability strategy, Bonn committed to reaching climate neutrality by 2035 within the boundaries of the 1.5 degree goal of Paris Agreement. We started to develop a climate plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2023. To date, we have been able to implement roughly 2/3 of our work program for the years 2023 to 2025. The monitor of implementation of the climate plan and its impacts, our sustainability reporting is currently being advanced to more digitalized and dynamic up-to-date sustainability monitoring including more detailed data. On our website, you can now find a digital dashboard, the Bonn Climate Compass, serving as a first step to make local climate data readily available for everyone. Our people are our core partners, providing topical information on easily accessible channels, reaching out and engaging them are all essential to leave no one behind. On our dashboard, you will find data reflecting the progress of our municipal measures. The production of solar energy has been expanded. Due to our solar support scheme, the expansion of photovoltaic systems could be successfully stimulated over the past 2 years. In the field of mobility, we are providing more detailed data with a transparency report which is dedicated particularly to climate-friendly mobility. Offering transparent data and showing our progress and obstacles opens the road to an honest dialogue on collaboration with our citizens. The same is true for the coordination between local, regional, and national level towards SDG implementation. Multi-level collaboration is crucial for the success of our work. None of us can bring about change alone. Detailed data allows us to pinpoint where we need a stronger collaboration with the national level, for instance by identifying areas where more flexibility in national legislation would be helpful when it comes to implementing local adapted solutions. Generally speaking, availability to basic SDG-related data from German cities is comparatively advanced thanks to the SDG portal, which was set up by the Association of German Cities and other partners. Besides, the German Council of Sustainable Development has set up a standardized sustainability reporting framework in 2021, serving as a guideline for a uniform reporting standard. Bonn was one of the first pilot municipalities to test this standard, using it as a basis for a second VLR in 2022. These tools have given German municipal sustainability reporting a big boost. With VLR reports, municipalities are successfully demonstrating their concrete contributions towards SDG implementation and can use them to advocate for a stronger multi-level coordination. This is something that is increasingly acknowledged by the national level. In 2021, the German Voluntary National Review included an annex on local governments, serving as a first step to connect VNRs and VLRs. This year, the German government has sent out a strong signal by including a large number of delegates from the local level, the official German delegation of the HLPF. A further step towards fruitful multi-level coordination. Consultation and collaboration with other cities worldwide and various networks has also helped us throughout the process. The participation in the OECD program, a territorial approach to the SDGs, as well as the exchange with our partner cities such as La Paz in Bolivia and within our city networks allowed us to gain stimulating insights from other cities around the globe. In a nutshell, let me highlight the most essential lessons we have taken from our experience with the VLRs to date. VLRs provide a systemic view on our sustainability engagement, raising our ambition to SDG implementation, monitoring and showcasing our sustainability activities enables local outreach, a fruitful dialogue, and the engagement of our citizens. Moreover, VLRs facilitate closer collaboration between cities, their network, and the national government. Thus, I'm highly looking forward to more multi-level collaboration. Sustainable change can only succeed if we are able to forge these multi-level partnerships in a joint effort while leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor, for providing very concrete examples of the benefits that the VLR process has brought to Bonn, particularly with the very interesting example on climate change. and how it has raised your ambition, and it sounds as though you've been very successful in implementing the approach that you have there. So thank you very much. And I now wish to give the floor to Ms. Ana Suiki, who is Undersecretary General of International Relations for the City of Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires has come to the HLPF this year with its 6th voluntary local review. So we look forward to hearing about how the city's truly impressive VLR practice has strengthened its sustainable development planning. Thanks, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, DESA, and all the organizers for allowing us to share the Buenos Aires city experience in SDGs localization. Since 2016, the city has been committed to implementing the 2030 agenda, and in 2019, we were one of the first cities in the world to present the VLR. This year, we'll publish our 6th edition. Along the way, we've had some trial and errors, learning valuable lessons, and found the role local and regional governments need to play to achieve our global goals, which is that I want to share with you today. After working on the SDGs report for many years, we started questioning how we could take it even further. Last December, when the new mayor of Buenos Aires, we started his new administration, and we began to designing a new international strategy that would reflect this government's priority, open Buenos Aires to new opportunities, and directly impact our sustainable development. Although we are dealing with the poly crisis, we see this world full as one that is of opportunity for the city of Buenos Aires and local government in general. We emerge on the international stage with have an impact and the capacity to build consensus. Beside our proximity to citizens, daily problems allows for implementing tailor-made policies, offering local responses to global challenges. In the city of Buenos Aires, action at the multi-level governance translate into bilateral and multilateral cooperation. During the last 6 months of our administration, we have been working bilateral to promote Buenos Aires' interest by creating opportunity through partnership and exchange with our peers worldwide and with other states. To mention some example, we partnered with the city of Hamburg to deepen policy exchange to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fight global warming. We kicked off the relation with Dublin, a pioneer city in adapting emerging technologies and the development of startups. With Tokyo, we developed a robust line of work in terms of innovation and technology, which seeks to promote a public policy aimed at sustainability, public safety, and inclusion. And we partnered with Berlin to learn more about the coastal regeneration policies in their street park to improve our coastal life. While bilateral cooperation allows us to identify strategic actors and establish relationships with cities and regions that have provided innovative urban solutions for common problems, multilateral cooperation offers the state to reach local influence to the international level. I must mention that UCLG and the Global Task Force have done an outstanding job of including local and regional government in the Pact of the Future, and here is where multi-level governance plays a key role. Together with the Argentine Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are working with our COP negotiators to encourage the recognition of local government in the fight against climate change, to stress the need for affordable finance, and to represent the cities of the South perspectives demanding the importance of taking into account our particularities and the importance of focusing in adaptation in which take into consideration our relative emissions. We are doing something similar regarding the Pact of the Future. We are working with our mission here in the United Nations and the rural countries to advocate for and defend the inclusion of cities in the Pact. In terms of partnership and multi-level governance, we are also working with the UN Coordinator Office in Argentina in developing a cooperation action plan similar to the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation at the country level to fully coordinate the actions between the UN system and government department, align them to the sixth transition proposed by the Secretary General, and to be able to measure impacts and results on the city's sustainable development. Lastly, I want to briefly touch back on VLRs and how they are catalyzed for local government in the international arena. Through reporting, we get a clear evidence-based picture of where we are and where we need to go. This picture shows that two-thirds of the agenda relies on local action in a state-centric structured world. Hence, moving from reporting to action necessarily calls for reshaping the international financial architecture and taking the multilateral system crisis an opportunity to advocate for city. To meet this end, we have tools available, multi-level governance being one of them, and in this context, the Summit of the Future represents a unique opportunity to do so. In the city of Buenos Aires, you will all find an ally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ana, for sharing the impressive experience of Buenos Aires. I think the example of how VLRs have facilitated the ability of Buenos Aires to enter bilateral and multilateral relationships and find new partners is something that is going to be of interest to a lot of local governments who are also looking for these kinds of new partnerships. So thank you very much. I now wish to give the floor to Mr. Tomonori Hiorike, who is Director of Planning and Coordination in Tokyo's Office of the Governor for Policy Planning, to share the experience of Tokyo, including in relation to your extraordinary awareness raising and stakeholder consultation processes. The floor is yours, Tom.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to have an opportunity for the presentation regarding Tokyo's approach for the SDGs. Today, I'd like to cover the strategy of Tokyo and the relationship of these SDGs. Then, the composition of the error and some examples of the initiatives. In particular, focusing on the scope of this session, multi-level governance dialogue and inclusive governance. Okay, let's get started. Please, next slide, please. Okay, this slide is common to all my presentation this week. This shows the overview of Tokyo's long-term strategy. We set up a vision for the 2040s and formulated the strategies toward 2030. So this amount to 21. By implementing these strategies, we would like to realize the safe, diverse, and smart city. Next, please. This is a full list of Tokyo's long-term strategies. Since we have a very limited time, so I'd like to focus on the strategy related to the scope of this session. Next, please. Our strategy is not a one-off snapshot, and we are continuing upgrading. To make it, it is necessary to conduct reviewing. So we established the policy dashboard that visualizes the achievement for the target. We verify indicators and upgrade the strategies every fiscal year. Next, please. We formulated the voluntary local review twice, in 2021 and 2023. This is fully aligned with Tokyo's long-term strategy. Next, please. This shows the composition of Tokyo's VLR. As I mentioned earlier, first part is vision for 2040s, and then policy goals for 2030. We show the graphic to show the progress towards the goals. And finally, we show some measures to be implemented in the future. As you can see, it goes beyond the typical function of reviewing, future-oriented and very unique. So we think this shows a new model for the VLR in the world in the future. Next, please. Let me show you a strategy regarding the inclusive governance. This is extracted from the VLR, and every strategy has the same format like this. As I mentioned earlier, first is the vision for 2040s, second is goal for 2030. This page is regarding the community, and this is a key word for this strategy. That is the reason why you can see the volunteers acting rate in the bottom. Next, please. As you can see in the right side, this figure decreased sharply during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are finding a very good recovery. Next, please. Let me show you some initiatives regarding this strategy. In the top, you can find the initiative regarding the renovation of vacant houses. Due to the decrease of the population, the increase of the number of vacant houses getting a big problem in Japanese society. So we are providing support to renovate such vacant houses to the community center and so on to revitalize the community. I think this issue will be the common in the world in the future. However, such kind of initiatives in this page merely implemented by municipalities, and Tokyo Metropolitan Government is providing support for them. Next, please. Exactly speaking, Tokyo Metropolitan Government is the subnational and prefectural government, and there are 62 municipalities in Tokyo. As for the inclusive governance and involvement of segments that tend to be left behind, the support for municipalities is the key, I think. And I think VLR processes contains such kind of elements, such as stakeholder meeting. However, municipalities have a very limited chance to get into the international society. And even in Tokyo, most of the municipalities don't know enough regarding the VLR. So we organize an event, workshop regarding the VLR with UNSCAP this February. Next slide, please. This is one page of the slide. That is the reason why this is written in Japanese and English. Next, please. In this workshop, participants, municipal government officials, could experience process for formulating VLRs, including stakeholder meetings. Next, please. As a conclusion, let me show you Tokyo's approach for SDGs. There are 4 pillars, but I'd like to focus on third item: relationship and collaboration between subnational and municipal government, and capacity building for municipal governments. This point was discussed in the side event hosted by Tokyo Metropolitan Government this week. And we tried to make a feedback to the municipalities as was the result of the dialogue with the world. And we tried to realize inclusive governance. Thank you very much.
important example of Tokyo, including how Tokyo is using dashboards to measure both achievements of goals and effectiveness of approaches, and for emphasizing the need for ongoing awareness raising and capacity building of local governments and stakeholders on the SDGs themselves and on VLR processes. We have on the program for the event today that we would have questions and answers. Right now, I think in the interest of time, we're still going to have them, but we are going to move them to the end of the second segment, the second panel that we have this afternoon, which focuses more on the UN system and the support of international organizations. So colleagues, as national and local governments have in recent years increasingly made clear the value of VNRs and VLRs to support integrated SDG planning and implementation, there has also been a growing response from the UN system, also from other intergovernmental organizations and international non-governmental organizations, which have been increasingly working to support these efforts through capacity building, and also supporting participation at intergovernmental dialogues and events, such as we're seeing here at the HLPF, and also in research and analysis, such as the policy briefs, the interagency policy briefs that Amson mentioned during his opening remarks. And now we are fortunate to have the opportunity this afternoon to zoom in on the efforts of 3 particular different UN or international entities. So we are going to start this next session, this next panel, with Mr. Rio Hara, who is Chief of the Equality, Development, and Rule of Law section at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And he is going to share on OHCHR's current and future support for SDG localization efforts. Mr. Hara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carol, and we're very happy to be here and to share some of our thoughts from our experience in working with local governments. But first, a few things. As you know, the 2030 agenda is a transformative agenda, which needs to be translated into concrete actions at local level. This requires a whole of society approach and actions at all levels of government, because we will not achieve SDGs nor solve global challenges without local action and local solutions. So here I want to talk not just about localizing SDGs, but localizing human rights, because these 2 agendas are mutually reinforcing, and the VNR, VLR can be a tool to connect the dot between those 2. The human rights are the bedrock of the 2030 agenda. The cities and local governments are at the front line in delivering on human rights, including on economic and social rights like housing, education, water. Human rights are about equality and non-discrimination, as the South African colleague was talking about. We are projecting that 70% of our population will live in cities by 2015. So local governments have an immense responsibility in tackling poverty and inequalities to ensure that no one leaves behind. No one is left behind. Human rights are also about participation, accountability. Local governments play a critical role in protecting that civic space, empowering civil society, and providing an enabling environment for the participation in public decision-making process at local and community level. So this is why we have been increasingly working with local governments in recent years, also in partnership with the UCLG and the Human Rights Cities movement. We have seen many cities taking progressive stance on human rights and proactive approach to safeguard human rights of their citizens, migrants, and we have seen this most vividly during the COVID pandemic. And at the same time, local governments also face various challenges, right, in realizing human rights, including limited awareness among city officials about human rights norms and standards, but also constraints in terms of financial resources, coordination challenges between different levels of governments. And some of these challenges and promising practices were also discussed under the Human Rights Council including at the expert meeting that we organized last year, the report of which was presented to the current session of the Economics Council that's concluding this week. So when we engage with mayors, what they're telling us is that embracing human rights framework has helped local authorities to develop a more cross-cutting and inclusive approach to the SDG challenges and other challenges that face at the local level. So with SDGs being and human rights being deeply interconnected and integrated policies that aim to advance the SDGs in a way that consistently and consciously promotes and protects human rights can pave the way forward to ensure that no one will be left behind. And this is where the voluntary local reviews have been useful. I was looking at the latest report on UCLG on localizing. There are many examples of VLRs, VNRs, that and cities have used this to create stronger cross-sectoral coordination and citywide review of progress on priority issues on the SDGs. So integrating human rights-based approaches in the VLRs and more broadly in the local laws, policies, and administrative structures will result in more targeted and efficient solutions that address not just the SDGs, but also many of the human rights challenges regarding discrimination and inequalities. So before concluding, I'd just like to discuss briefly how our office can and help support the efforts of local governments. One thing that the mayors have repeatedly told us is that we need more dedicated space, such as this one, to where local governments can share experience and learn from each other in advancing SDGs and human rights. Emilia was also talking about earlier about city-to-city cooperation. So our office will be happy to facilitate such dialogues and exchanges in collaboration with UCLG and other partners. We can also deliver information and training sessions on the links between the 2030 Agenda and human rights, which can help better integrate human rights in VLRs. Second, our office can support the closer interactions between the local authorities and between human rights mechanisms and its outcomes, including integrating the recommendations, implementing those recommendations, and linking them with VNRs and VLR. For example, over the last 2 years, our office supported 7 provinces in Uruguay on the implementation of the SDGs in a way that also fulfilled the recommendations coming out of these human rights mechanisms. So, killing 2 birds in 1 stone. So the activities included analyzing those provincial policies from human rights lens, identifying best practices, training government staffs, and publishing the outcomes of the research and the guidance to help the local planning process. So we can provide such tailored support for local government officials on how cities can engage with the mechanisms and how a human rights-based approach can be applied in the development and implementation of local policies and programs. So we look forward to continue working with you and to strengthen support to local governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing this emphasis on the mutually reinforcing nature of the SDGs and human rights, and giving us to think about how treaty body processes and SDG processes can best work together to provide the best results for local and national governments. Thank you very much. I now wish to give the floor to Ms. Marika Aber, who is Economic Affairs Officer with the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Marika will be sharing on behalf of both ECLAC and all 5 of the UN's regional commissions, which have been actively supporting both VNRs and VLRs. Marika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Carol. Okay, maybe we can move straight. Okay, I would like to present you like an overview, like our regional perspectives, as Carol said, from all the 5 different regions. I would like to start with the African region. Next slide, please. So we see, as in the other regions as well, there's a great momentum for voluntary local reviews. We have 20 completed VLRs in the African region and more than 30 on the way, as you can see on this map, with the green ones indicating they're completed, the yellow ones initiated, and the yellow ones planned. VLRs contributed as well to several of the 2024 VNRs that will be presented next week in the high-level segment for Uganda and Zimbabwe. And very interesting to know that Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Rwanda have actually national SDG coordination mechanism facilities in place that conduct VLRs across the entire country, so in different cities and territories. UNECA also offers national capacity building workshops on localization and also involves not just local authorities, but also representatives of vulnerable groups, including youth, persons with disabilities, and women. Next slide. Let's now move to the region, our region of ECLAC, Latin America and the Caribbean. So far, this region has produced 85 voluntary local reviews in 67 locations in 11 countries. So there's a high concentration, and as you can guess, there are many locations that have actually produced more than one VLR so far. We've heard already the experience of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and the other countries that have produced VLRs are Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay, including 6 of those countries that will actually present their VNRs this year. So we're going to be really excited to see them and see how they have linked the VNRs to the VLRs. We also have a community of practice established in ECLAC for more than 4 years for the voluntary national reviews. But on many occasions, we opened it up to local authorities and to discuss the linkages between the national and the local efforts. In this regard, we have also collaborated with DESA and with UN Habitat and other partners on holding national, regional, or local capacity workshops to enhance this vertical integration. You can see some of the pictures, like a workshop in Honduras, and also our regional forum where we conducted a whole day VLR workshop here, with some familiar faces as well from the room. And in this context as well, we launched this year in April, like a regional guide on how to elaborate VLRs, like a very practical tool for local authorities to elaborate those reviews. And last but not least, at ECLAC, we have the Regional Observatory on Planning for Development that also offers like a tool for analysis and information, including local governments and other actors. Let's now move to the region of Asia and the Pacific, to ESCAP. They have done a really interesting research together with UCLG on VLR integration in the region all the way from 2016 to 2023. And they measured the degree of the consultations of local and regional governments in the VNRs. Unfortunately, so far we've seen that the results is maybe a little bit disappointing. They're not sufficiently engaged in the VNR processes in that region. We can see that only 30% of VNR processes included the consultations of local and regional governments with a medium to high degree. Sometimes stakeholders were even consulted, but then they weren't reflected in the final VNR reports, which is interesting to mention. On a good side, we have several examples from the region that have very good examples. We heard the experience of Tokyo, Japan, for instance, and also the VNR from Fiji last year featured localization not just as an isolated example within the VNR, but as a part of the means of implementation chapter, and they are clearly making a statement that local SDG action begins with voluntary local reviews. And now let's move to the Arab region. This is showing ESCWA's VLR experiences. ESCWA has supported various VLRs in the region, including in Jordan, Morocco, Palestine, and Tunisia. They also gathered several good practices regarding the VLRs, and some selected examples would, for instance, be Amman, that really led to enhanced policy coherence and coordination, or Arjadir, that improved local level data, also talking on how to complement data, especially from the local to the national level. And there are several ongoing efforts and next steps in this region, for instance, to scale up those efforts to more cities around the region, to establish regional VLR guidelines, as have done so the other regional commissions, to build local VLR capacities, to have a robust data collection and monitoring framework in place at the local level, And last but not least, also to create multi-stakeholder coalitions around the topic of SDG localization. And last but not least, we move all the way to the region of UNECE and their work on VNRs and VLRs. We also have a colleague here, so if they want to complement from ECA and ECE. In the context of the UN Forum of Majors, which obviously promotes a multi-level governance, coherence, and the complementarity between the different levels, we have seen a lot of best practices and also human-centered solutions for SDG implementation. And actually, right after the Summit of the Future coming up during the General Assembly this year in September, Geneva will host this fourth Forum of Majors meeting from the 13th of September to the 1st of October. This meeting will support the implementation of the Pact for the Future. It will hold sessions on youth and future generations as like a major pillar of the Pact for the Future, and also a side event on women and majors. This region also offers very interesting reviews and webinars, linking the voluntary national reviews, sub-national reviews, and local reviews, and connecting the different levels via best practices from the region. ECE has also developed, as other regions, the guidelines for the development of VLRs, directed as well as local authorities, and also with the focus on mobilizing different stakeholders, stronger relationships between the different levels of government, and also really to complement the VNR processes. At last, there is also a very interesting trench project on VLRs led by UN Habitat, but also complemented by UNECA, UNSL and DESA, so we see all the actors here in the room present, with community and stakeholder engagement in different European countries. That's pretty much it from my side, but maybe colleagues from the other regional commissions want to complement. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Marika, for sharing the rich array of actions being taken in all regions by the regional commissions, including the development of important tools, their VLR guidelines for all regions now, and collection of good practices and your efforts in capacity building. Thank you very much, and we'll go to questions and answers in a moment. But first, I would like to go to our final panelist for the day, who is going to be Mr. Stefano Marta, who is head of unit for Smart and Sustainable Cities at OECD, and who will be sharing with us, at least in part, regarding the recently launched OECD SDSN policy paper on localizing the SDGs and changing landscape.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for involving the OECD in this very interesting lab. I will focus on 5 key areas that has emerged also from the paper that we launched with SDSN at the beginning of this year. Are 5 priority, 5 gaps where we still think we need to invest to further develop the VNR, VLR, and the localization of the SDGs. The first one is multi-level governance. As we heard from Emilia, from the ECLG report, 50% of Association of Local and Regional Governments still say that they're not involved in the VNR. The findings of our survey with the SDSN and the European Committee of Region, 44% of the respondents told us that the lack of vertical coordination is one of the main challenges for the localization of the SDGs. So we see that there are some great examples like Italy, Germany, Japan, and others, the Nordic countries. So now VNR and VLR can be aligned, but there's still a lot of work to do. So as OECD here, we are starting I would like to mention one project that we're starting very soon with Italy. In September, we are basically continuing supporting the great work that Mara has been sharing, and we'll be focusing on how policy coherence for sustainable development can be a tool for the localization, for advancing the localization of the SDGs in 4 Italian regions. So this is one of our priorities. The second one is to continue supporting cities and regions in mainstreaming the SDGs in the local development plan, policy, and strategy. And we were discussing on Tuesday the launch of the Nordic VSR that there is an SDG fatigue, that sometimes there is a deprioritization of the SDGs compared to other priorities. And what we were mentioning is that there is perhaps also some work to do in terms of awareness raising, because we need to explain and create and also document that the SDGs are not a framework and agenda on top of the others. So it's not the mayor need to choose between housing and the SDGs or between climate and the SDGs, but the SDG framework is a guide that local, regional, and national government can use to do what they already need to do, but in a more coherent and integrated way. So this is another area where we will be working. The third one is the city-city partnership, the centralized development cooperation, was also mentioned by Emilia. Here we have two big projects. One is with the European Commission, because now there is a big framework, investment framework at the European Commission level for international cooperation, the EU Global Gateway. And it is, as it was designed at the very beginning, very much focused on national government. So now we are working to try to understand how city-city partnership can be a tool to mobilize investment for local and regional government to achieve the SDGs. And also our DDC, Decentralized Development Cooperation, is a tool beyond the financial component to strengthen capacity and share knowledge between cities in OECD and in other countries to advance the SDGs. And Anna mentioned various collaboration between Buenos Aires and other cities to show how this can happen. And we also go to work with the German government to understand and to document how centralized development cooperation has been contributing to achieving the SDGs in these 9 years, and what can be improved to advance progress on that, also in terms of quantitative analysis. A fourth area where we are going to invest is how digitalization, and in particular how artificial intelligence, can support government in localizing the SDGs. We discussed this in San Sebastian, the roundtable that we organized with the Local 2030. Was one of the main sessions. There is now research showing that 80% of the SDG target can be progress on 80% of the SDG target can be speed up by artificial intelligence, in particular in areas that are key for urban development like mobility, healthcare, energy, water, and others. At the same time, there is the risk that artificial intelligence can inhibit the progress on 35% of the SDGs. So there is a key role for policy, for governance here to make sure that this is not going to happen. And finally, the other key priority for this is data information, evidence-based policy making. We've been developing a localized indicator framework for cities and regions to the SDGs with a web tool that all cities and regions can use until now. But there are still many gaps, in particular at the local level in terms of these indicators. So now we are launching at the World Urban Forum version 2.0 of this indicator framework. And we hope that we can collaborate with the UN system, UN Habitat, UNDESA, UCFG to advance this indicator framework that is focusing not only on OECD countries and help support also non-OECD countries, cities and regions in non-OECD countries to measure progress on this. And here I conclude, and thank you, Carol.
A roadmap, if I may call it that, or the priorities of OECD for the coming years. Very rich range of work that you're going to be doing, and thank you also for your partnership in the interagency policy brief series that is about to be published. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is 2:45. We have a hard stop at 3 o'clock today, but I would like to take the moment to take a few questions, and then we can turn back to our panelists to respond to these. So, are there any questions in the room? No questions. Yes, please.
Yeah. Let me thank the presenters. It is very, very clear from the presentations that VNRs and DLRs are really contributing to a great extent in achieving integrated planning at various levels. But as practitioners of VNRs and DLRs, I think our next task is to make sure that we can actually document or actually make sure that we have evidence in terms of how the VLRs are contributing to concrete action at that level. I think that is very important, and therefore, the other thing that goes with it is how do we make sure that the funds are actually accompanying the VLRs? How do we make sure that there's what we call channeling funds to the local authorities based on the VLRs that have been developed? I think I like the example that was given by Bon as well. I think also something in Buenos. But I think this is something that is lacking because if we don't do that, then we shall end up still looking at the VLRs and VNRs as a reporting process. And associated with that is in future when we are going to have the VLRs in particular, I would be very keen if we can have the beneficiaries in the room. The beneficiaries, the people who have actually benefited from the VLRs, who can be able to shed more light in terms of how they have been able to benefit from the VLR process. And I think there will be going to be a great focus on the VLRs in the future because we are looking at them as a tool that we can use for accelerating the implementation for the SDGs. And what role can they actually play and how can we improve them? In Africa, I think they are growing. We hope that we shall have one time, point in time before the end of the SDG period, have universal coverage of VLRs, just like we're achieving this year. By the way, I would like to congratulate Africa. This year, we are going to achieve universal coverage of VNRs, with our last country representing their VNR this year. So we hope that at some point in time, we shall have universal coverage of VLRs, which are really delivering impact at every locality and with concrete results that we can be able to feel. Because this is what we want. It should not be a tool that enables integrated planning and planning for nothing. It's planning to channel resources and planning for impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other comments or questions? And then we'll take a couple and then we can have some responses. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to highlight two things. I think it's a little bit also related to what my colleague Charles said. And then earlier, yes, we can conduct as many as VLRs or VNRs as possible. But what's next? You know, that was the thing also raised earlier by the speaker, that we see the reports, we continue conducting, but the gap we find in that report, what are the next steps that we are taking? Are we ready for it in terms of financially and so on? Because most of the time, what VLRs is good is for us is it helps us for data. Actually, data is an issue most of the time when we do VLRs. So you see the gap there, and then now the next step is okay to bridge those gaps. But do we have for that those resources? What are the strategy for it? Because we can say in Africa we did 25 VLRs and then 30 is underway. Then what? So that is the thing I think we collectively we need to answer. And I know from Italy they talked about partnership as well. So partnerships of course important to scale up the process of VLRs and so on. But again, concrete results that we need to see. So I think we need to now the step or the next focus should be maybe in the concrete results more than the numbers. What is the quality there in there? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more comment or question, and then we will turn back to our panelists. Okay.
I will take that comment.
Okay.
And say that what is increasingly becoming a threat to the value of the VLRs is the fact that there is diminishing downward accountability. I think that when we look at budgets that are prepared, when budgets are prepared, everybody would like to account to the central government on how the money was being utilized. But nobody would like to let the communities and everybody know that this is how your money was utilized and this is where we went wrong. And therefore we need, as part of the VLR process, really strengthen downward accountability, making sure that we are really accountable to the people whom we want to deliver the services. Thank you very much for giving me that one.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let me now turn back to the panelists, perhaps starting over here for any brief final responses or remarks that you would like to share. We'll close.
Yeah,
Yes,
very, very interesting session, really. I mean, really worthwhile doing this, and the different perspectives that has been put forward that triggered a lot of thought. In particular, I would like to react to this last part, where we say, okay, what do we do with this now, right? Which I opened up that conversation, and I think our colleagues have articulated that very well. Because it is true that are we ready to act on what we find? And there are two aspects here that I would like to address, and they are not full answers or solutions, but the two aspects that we need to consider. The first one is that a lot of the findings that we are going to have from the VLRs and PSRs are findings that are not only related to the sustainable development goals. They are related to other agendas as well, the financing for development agenda, the climate agenda, the human rights agenda. And of course, all the agendas belong to the SDGs, but I think we need to look at other processes to start finding some of the answers to that. Translation for our constituency, it means that you need a different type of investment, a different type of financial mechanism to address some of the gaps. So that's one aspect of what we, and I agree with you, is a joint responsibility we need to look at. And then the other thing is very much about accountability. And there is, of course, it is about national government also being accountable to the communities, but local governments also being accountable to the communities, and the communities understanding how things work and how priorities are made, and feeling ownership over what is happening. To also break the vicious cycle that we are facing now of the lack of trust, misinformation, etc. So there are two aspects here that I think is both inwards, and I do agree my own constituency needs to put work into that accountability question, but it's also as international community, national governments, etc. We need to do the exercise to actually transform some of the processes, to actually enable investment in, at the end of the day, local service provision. So to me, that's the thought I would like to leave in the room, and hopefully we can work around it.
Thank you so much. Okay, Anna?
Thank you, Emilia, for your answers. And from Buenos Aires perspective, VLRs is a very strategic document. But the important is what are you doing to implement the 17 objectives of the agenda. So the important is what your city is doing to improve the general agenda, to fight the climate change, to reduce poverty, to improve health, education. So the VLR is just a document, very useful, because we can stay here as a local government, as a strategic actor in development, and say, okay, we need finances for this. We want to change the architecture of financials. So it's a very important strategic document, but you need to focus to implement the goals and achieve the goals. Then it's accountability, it's information, it's data for your city, can show you where you can improve or where you have a gap, and also it's a document for local governments to play a key role in the multilateral system, and to talk with our national government, with the member state. But the focus is in implementing the SDGs, not what next for the VLR, the next one. You start to work for the next. In our case, is we are talking with the UN system in Argentina and say, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
We want to develop an strategic framework of cooperation with the system, try to link the VLR with the different agencies in Argentina. But what next? The next VLR.
Thank you so much. We have the space a little bit longer. There's some snacks out there so for those of you who still have questions, if our panelists can stay a bit longer, I encourage you to interact with them a little bit after this session. I am pleased now to give the floor to Ms. Shipra Narayan-Suri, who is Chief of the Urban Practices Branch at UN Habitat, who is going to close our lab today and who is also going to share with us a bit about an important speaking of what comes next, and then of course next event at which we can continue some of today's discussions and learn from additional experiences. Over to you, Shipra.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carol. Thank you, Amson, colleagues, Amelia. It's really been very, very interesting, and thank you for inviting me to join this and to sort of try and close out this particular session. What we've heard, of course, is that, many perspectives, but converging onto the point of VLRs becoming important instruments, accelerators, transformative tools, but that transformation potential needs to be realized in different ways and at scale. I think that's the first and the most important piece. And the other piece is that VLRs by themselves are far less effective than VLRs connected deeply to VNRs and voluntary subnational reviews connected deeply to VNRs, because ultimately that cohesion, that coherence, that connection between the reviews, but also the review processes and the processes of engagement and the spaces of engagement, and then bringing them collectively here to these spaces of engagement, which are the mandated platforms for discussion of progress on the SDGs. That's a very, very important piece. And we've heard a lot of examples on how, these connections have actually back home in different countries. We heard from Italy, we heard from Germany, and others have actually helped to perhaps break down some barriers between national and local governments and build more policy coherence and more systematic dialogue that goes much beyond the SDGs and much beyond the voluntary local reviews. I think someone mentioned in the last session in the forum that we just closed before this meeting, that these 7-8 years of advocacy and push and the discussion, the movement around VLRs and VSRs has also opened up spaces in these arenas where 7 years ago we were 20 minutes down the road, whereas now local and regional governments are an integral part of the conversations. At the high-level political forum, at the SDG summit last year, hopefully at the Summit for the Future in September, at the COPs, at various international platforms, and hopefully also at the Human Rights Council and other similar spaces. I think this is fundamental. What we are seeing in terms of the challenges is that if we go one VLR at a time, one community at a time, one city at a time, we can keep going till 2091 and we're not going to crack it. I think what we need is what Habitat is trying to do, for example, is to develop national localization frameworks or strategies. So you hit a country and you do all cities with the support of the national associations of local governments. And I cannot emphasize enough the role of these structural bodies, the national networks of local governments, the national associations of local governments, in helping us go to scale. From one Buenos Aires, how do we make this an Argentina-wide movement? From one Bonn, from one Milan, from one, and there are many examples that this is already happening. But we need that to happen if we are going to hit the targets by 2030 and not by 2021. So that's something that's very important. Habitat is trying to launch a number of tools with the partners in the room, action-oriented VLR methodology, youth-oriented VLR methodology, etc. But the uptake of that
has to be systematized in a much bigger way than we have foreseen so far. Now, in terms of taking the conversation further, and I think let's not underestimate, I know, there is that piece around SDG fatigue. There is the piece around, okay, 6 VLR, but what next? There is the piece around local regional governments forum session, VNR Lab, but what next? But I think these spaces of engagement continue to be important because our job is not yet done. And this advocacy needs to continue. So, very pleased actually to announce that next week we will run 2 days, 2 full days, what we call VLR, VSR days. It's not just 1 hour, it's not just 2 hours. It's 4 large interactive sessions, 2 days of what we started during COVID, the VLR, VSR days, and has now become really an institutional moment and an opportunity. And next week, it's going to be fully online, and this is, of course, in partnership with UCLG and DESA and the Regional Economic Commissions. So not just on Habitat's behalf, but on behalf of everyone, we'd like to really invite you to those. Very importantly, what I just want to flag is we want to take the conversation a bit deeper in these VLR, VSR days. So the thematics of this are very important. It's not just, okay, you did a VLR, what's your experience? We did a VLR, what's our experience? The first session on that really talks about multi-level governance and the deep thinking around how these new mechanisms, reporting mechanisms, are becoming an instrument to expand, enhance, deepen, strengthen multi-level governance. The second session is really, to my mind, probably the most important is this rebuilding trust session. We heard this in the Local 2030 session yesterday so many times. Trust, trust, trust. The breakdown of trust between communities and their leaders, between local governments and national governments, between national governments and the international community, between stakeholders, the misinformation, the disinformation. I think it's really important to use data and to use the VLRs as an instrument to build back trust and public accountability. You raise the point about accountability. A third theme is really about touching the basics of people's lives, basic services and service providers, and their relationship with the voluntary local reviews. Because SDGs are not just about local and regional governments providing local service. There are other important critical actors at the local level, such as service providers, often linked to local governments, but often independent of local governments, who have an absolutely critical role. For example, water sanitation operators have a critical role to play here to achieve the SDGs. So I think that piece is also important. And the last is really a session on evidence-based policy making, but also linking it to finance. Moving from data and reports to reality and impact is a very big leap. And that is the point that I think was raised here just now. That's the leap we have to take, and that's where we get stuck. So that session, again, is extremely important. I just want to also say that UN Habitat convenes the World Urban Forum every 2 years. This year, again, as a result of advocacy of everybody in this room, the forum in Egypt, in Cairo in November, the focus of that forum, the theme of that forum is on localizing. It has a catchy title which says it all starts at home, but the underpinning of that is really around localization, local actions for sustainable cities and communities, not to let national governments off the hook, but I think it's very important that we really have that conversation there. So let's continue to work together. Let's continue to try and make those big leaps and those big jumps. Do join us next week for the VLR VSR days. Do join us for the World Urban Forum. And do reach out to any of us for any further discussion and support in your journey to localize the SDGs. Thank you.